What's up, guys? Welcome to the ALLSMITH Project. Today's guest is a coach and author of Freestyle. He's a movement explorer guiding people in the realm of solopreneurship and emotional fitness. And he's dedicated to helping people design a life worth living through fitness and personal development. One of my favorite people on the planet, the man, Carl Paoli. What's up, man?
How's it going? That was a nice intro. I sound special or good or whatever you want to call it. I sound better than I guess I am.
I disagree. You're actually all of those things, but you're also none of them. And that's a great place to start the conversation today. I've followed you for a long time, and one of my favorite things is the concept of a title, right? Like how the world identifies people based on maybe a job title or maybe a role that they play. What are your thoughts on that and kind of being labeled and put in a box that way? I'm not a big fan of it.
I've struggled with it, but now I'm totally down. And it's just, yeah, it's been one of those things that I've had to kind of wrestle with. And it started when I retired from gymnastics. I was so bummed. When I didn't make it to the Olympics or, didn't make it onto the national team. And I just felt like a complete failure. And after that, I was like, yeah, screw it. I'm not a gymnast. Everybody saw me as a gymnast, and I thought I was a gymnast. But after not being able to meet my potential, I just had this like deep sense of disappointment in myself. And that's where action sports came in and saved me. All of a sudden I was snowboarding, and there were less rules on how to be quote unquote good. And I was like, oh man, snowboarding is not one thing. There's a lot of ways of expressing yourself through snowboarding. And the same thing happened with wakeboarding. So I got into board sports, and that's where I found this freedom of doing something without being it. And I love that. And then fast forward to, getting into the CrossFit world and then finding some, I guess, recognition of sorts within the community as a contributor. And all of a sudden being considered a coach. And that was the first time I was like, yeah, I like this idea of being a coach. I think it's cool. And it was going well enough that I was like, and I can also show that I'm producing something. I was very, and I still am, I think we all are. I was very numbers driven. I was very much performance driven. And I really cared about having proof of concept. But then something happened within the CrossFit space, which was, oh, this is the gymnastics guy. This is the muscle up guy. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm much more than that. And I just had this crazy resistance to want to break free from it. And I don't know if we talked about this on the last episode I was on with you. Maybe we did. So if I'm repeating myself, this is episode 2 or part 2 of our conversation.
Totally. I want to bookmark you there real quick around just the concept of identity, right? Like you self-identified as a gymnast, but you're Carl. And it's a unique concept in the world of what do you do? And then the love, the recognition, and the notoriety, I guess, around an action or a verb or something that you are actually physically performing, as opposed to who you are actually as a human being. And that's going to inevitably evolve over the course of time, different seasons, different chapters, different pages in the book, which you've done a great job now learning that. And it's a mystery looking forward, but it's science looking back. Now looking back and I can conceptually understand how board sports and freestyle and gymnastics and all these things, you piece together that puzzle and it helps encompass some of the things that you've contributed, but you're so much more than that. And that's something that I really tinker with and struggle with, and I love diving into, because I think there's so many people that that play with that, where there's this job title, this resume. You go to holiday get-togethers. They're about to take place. We just finished Halloween. We're about to get into Thanksgiving and Christmas, and people are going to be at the food table serving themselves, maybe grabbing some drinks. Oh, hey, nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. What do you do? That seems to be just a cultural norm in many avenues, not, hey, I'm so-and-so. How are you? What brought you here today? Who are some of the people that you've interacted with before? That's a way different conversation and energy than, hey, what do you do? And then based on your response, I'm actually going to assess and quantify and provide, as you said, a proof of concept, and then associate my level of respect, probably associated with how much money or the notoriety of the title that you share.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. And I want to use this platform to deconstruct that level of thinking and get people to think deeper.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point, and I've been there too. And I used to say I don't like that either. But now I disagree. I do like it. I think it's needed and it's great. This is kind of interesting. Yesterday, I went to see a family friend to do some training, and I was going to, of course, coach them. And I ring on the doorbell, and somebody who's working at the house answers and says, yeah, who are you? And I said, I'm looking for so-and-so. And they're like, and what are you here for? I said, I have an appointment. Oh, for what? And I said, training. And he's like, oh, the personal trainer, come in. And then he calls the person who owns the house and who I'm going to meet, and says, hey, the personal trainer is here. And I'm like, that's funny. I don't identify as a personal trainer, but yeah, in that moment, I'm the personal trainer, and that's wonderful. And I just thought it was so funny because it's something that I have wrestled with in the past. Titles are one of those things that are a funny thing in our society, but they're also needed because if we don't have language to identify that which is in front of us, we have a hard time interacting with it. So it's good to label.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And that's one of my favorite things about conversation like this is like we can have differing opinions, but then just like that amazing metaphor, when you make a healthy argument, I'm like, maybe I can deconstruct that story ideation that I have around that concept, and it moves the needle closer. And hopefully, I think there's a lot of people that probably struggle with that concept. I don't think it's new by any means, but I do like that concept to allow yourself to be maybe labeled in that moment so people can better understand the role of the situation. And I think it's also very cool because just because you're labeled, it is a moment in time. You can also be something else later. And in your case, sometimes you're a father, sometimes you're a husband, sometimes you're a grandfather, sometimes you're a coach, sometimes you're a podcaster. And so many of us wear all those different hats. And I think that makes a really healthy analogy with that concept. I appreciate you sharing that, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think marketeers are great at using labels to sell their stuff. And I think where we experience dissonance at times where we're like, oh, my thinking is going that way, my emotions are going the other way, and I don't feel incoherence or I feel a little bit chaotic inside, is when that which we're expressing to be true in ourselves or alive in ourselves or that which we really care about or we think we know is not reflected back to us in a way that aligns with who we are. And then we're like, wait a second, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say this other thing. Why am I not being understood? Why am I not being in connection with you? And this is where I think a lot of us, and I mean, I've experienced this, we feel like, oh, well, there must be something wrong with my role, my title. Maybe there's something wrong with these other people. There's something that needs to be fixed. When in reality, nothing needs to be fixed. Everything just needs to be in development.
Oh, that's a really cool way of saying that. It's also like what you say and what I hear could be completely different. And like creating that level of understanding where where language is probably a loose form of hieroglyphics and is definitely related to the stories that we've each experienced up until that moment. I think the way you're describing it's very good.
Yeah, I mean, try to explain to somebody. When have you heard anybody tell you about a dream that they had, and for you to be like, "Oh, that's a cool dream," but for you, the person who was dreaming it, there was so much more to it, and you're like, "Man, this was really impactful for me," and I had this dream. It was strange, as whatever, and I feel compelled to tell you. Now I'm telling you, and you're bored out of your mind. It's kind of like that, and I think that's what we're wrestling with. We're wrestling with this external reality that we're living, and we're contrasting it with our internal reality. And in contrasting it with our internal reality, which is very elusive and elusive, both of those, it escapes us. It's like a dream, right? You have a dream. If you don't write it down or tell somebody, you won't remember that dream for a long time unless it was really impactful in some way, meaning it's escaping you. And it's also elusive, meaning it's part of an illusion. It's something that we are assigning meaning to. And when it comes to human performance, when it comes to just navigating being alive, this is the name of the game. And to me, it's just fun because I get to witness myself being a fool, trying to play this game. And then I get to have conversations like this where, people are maybe listening and thinking, this dude is a nut job. And that's fun too.
I actually think most people are going to listen to this, and I think we're discussing things that people naturally think about but don't talk about. Like the different concepts of the life that we live in between our ears, the internal, the external life of how we associate with our environment and with other people. But there's now actually this altered space, which is the internet and who we choose to be in a podcast or a social media platform or things like that. I've met many people that like they're one way in that platform and then they're one way in the workforce, and then you get with them one-on-one and they're different. And I don't know that it's purposeful. I just think that there are these internal states and these subtle masks that get worn in the different arena. And I think we're just in the midst of a lot of change happening all at once. And now we're seeing the integration of AI. And it's just eliciting a lot of moving pieces where we as humans, I think, subtly crave different forms of security and what we know. And you've done such a cool job. Like where I'm going with this is like, transition is such a special part of life and striving to master change. And you did that from your gymnastics days into finding freestyle and board sports and different forms of dance and flow into the coaching space, and now into more of like a business, solopreneurship, emotional fitness space, and obviously an author. But in each one of those, it's almost like you don't necessarily have a roadmap. And so inevitably, subconsciously, you might default to what you know, even though subtly you realize you are changing and the next environment and the next chapter is changing. How did you manage that toggling, and what advice would you give for people that are going through big seasons of change? They're trying to be open to the disruption, but simultaneously might be falling back towards, this is what I know.
Great question. If I look back and if I knew what I was getting myself into in each transition, I probably wouldn't do it because it completely sucks, and it's really hard, and it's just not fun. Transitions are not fun.
But staying the same isn't fun either.
It's not. And that's why.
So it's like pick your heart.
The inevitable is change. Exactly. The inevitable is change. And if we're going to be in change, whether it's circumstantial because we're all growing, aging, things are happening to us, might as well participate. I personally have chosen to participate in the way that I am changing in this world naturally, organically. Yeah, in a way that feels good to me and that feels true to me. So, for example, when I got the opportunity to write a book, I thought when I was a kid, I thought one day I'll write a book. And the fear I had as a kid was, well, I can't write. I can't really read. I was just a terrible writer and reader. How am I going to write a book? That's crazy. And I remember when I got the opportunity to write this book was because Kelly Starrett's co-author, Glenn Cardoza, who worked with the publishing house, Victory Belt, had me doing some pictures for Kelly Starrett's book. And Kelly was super supportive and said, hey, you need to get this guy a book deal. He needs to write a book. I was like, I'm not ready. This is insane. I can't write a book. I don't know how to do it. And Glenn's like, yeah, you just teach gymnastics, but in book format, it's fine. I was like, okay. So I got the opportunity to write the book. And I remember when I got the opportunity, the publishing house said, you need to have a co-author or a co-writer or at least a ghostwriter because we don't think you're capable of doing this. I was like, see, I'm not ready to write a book. The evidence was kind of there, but I have this book deal. And it took me 3 years of writing with my co-author to get to a point where I actually believed that I could do it. And that's where within 8 months, we wrote the book, published the book. It came out, became a New York Times bestseller, all those things that now are kind of like part of my history. But the
something
process
I want to
itself
note right
sucked.
there is it may have sucked, but also there's a few major takeaways. The magical people that choose to believe in us because they see those glimpses of potential are stellar.
Mm-hmm.
They are second to none. They see things that we don't see. In theory, they're visionaries that create subtle connection with us that elicits this master of change. Mm-hmm. And then it creates buy-in gradually over time through the planting of seeds. And it's, as Chris Voss would say from the book Never Split the Difference, it's this power of negotiation, of negotiating with you, seeing those little moments of magic and just kind of teasing them out little by little. And then inevitably, you have then the confidence and the motivation, both intrinsically and extrinsically, to then take the leap into this next thing. And eventually you get to the point where it's like, you know what? Maybe I can do this. Maybe these things do deserve to be seen and felt and shared with the world. And then what you don't even realize after that is by you doing that, then it motivates people like me. Then it has a domino effect downstream. So it's like going back to that intro piece where it's like, I described you as this stellar human. That's how I view you. From the moment that you and I crossed paths at a freestyle seminar, I was like, whoa, this guy speaks different. I don't need to do a pistol. I'm 6'4", 225 pounds. But you got me to believe that I could. Mm-hmm. I didn't believe I could figure out gymnastics being a basketball guy. You got to believe me that you got me to believe that I could. And so it's like the same thing that K-Star did, you've now done in the world. And what I'm so intrigued on is like, how do all of us do this within the tribe and community that we're around? Because man, look at that. Everybody's got this little gift. How do we tease that out of them to be like, you know what? Go play. Just start. See where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where I live in that space, and the reason I'm saying that in looking back, I wouldn't do it because it sucks so bad is because the nature of life is pretty harsh, especially if you actually start to look into nature, it's harsh, and if you look at what's happening just right now. We had Ukraine, and now we have back to the Middle East, this terrible war that's happening, which is just absolutely devastating. And I know nothing about geopolitics. I know nothing about religion, but I know that it's harsh as hell. And that is a transition they're going through. There's a transition happening, and this is why these wars, and then we can, talk about the industrial military complex and all these things, which again, I know nothing about, but in our own little ecosystem, our own little world, we experience the same thing. We go through these very painful transitions. And what I enjoy doing at the moment is encouraging people to see the things that make them unique. Say, oh, wow, you have a subtle way of expressing this thing that is very much yours, your style, your signature. Let's lean into that a little bit. And because I can't tell anybody to do anything, I can only encourage them. And the best way to encourage them is to create an environment where that is just naturally expressed. Then all of a sudden they enter a transition that may be painful, but on the other side brings this new sense of fulfillment, tapping into new potential, better performance, whatever it is that you actually care about. And to me, that's exciting. But I think that people deserve to know that change or really expressing yourself at the highest level or bringing your dream to life, whatever it is that you really care about, that's hard shit and it's going to be tough. So be ready for that. Also, know that you can develop a support system, a community, a group of people that support you, keep you accountable, and that if you do that, now you become self-directed, more autonomous, more engaged, and you actually start to produce those results faster. You actually move through those transitions with a little bit more ease. And I don't know, I think that's pretty cool when you know that. And there's technical ways of doing it. There's methods, practices, and everybody has found their own ways, and I'm curious about also connecting those ways.
Very well said, man. I think change is painful, and I think all of us go through different moments in time where the pain of staying the same is way worse than the pursuit of change. And that's when you see the disruption take place. And even though it is very painful.
You know what? I don't know if it's the same. I don't know if it's different. If it's if the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of change. I don't know, actually. I used to think that, but now I don't know. And
that's a really interesting thought, because I really think that as human beings, we're meant to grow and evolve. And I think there's this subtle intrinsic anxiety or pressure buildup maybe, where with stagnation, inevitably we're always going to wonder what's next. I don't know if everybody has that drive or that ambition, but I think it's kind of wired into our DNA as humans to try to figure out, like, what's out there, what's behind that corner, what's behind the curtain, what's at that next ridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're definitely driven to explore. We're definitely curious beings. That there's no doubt about it. What I'm saying is that the pain may not be worse, just different.
Well said. I agree with that. It's kind of like the concept in CrossFit, where it's like not constantly varied high intensity functional movement, but it's constantly varied functional movement performed at varied intensities. Like it needs to be different.
Right. And I think that's something that becomes philosophical, and it has to do with our awareness and the way that we see the world. Yeah, perception is a big one.
Totally. I want to ask you about something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I've heard other people talk about it a little bit, but it's it's called the region beta paradox. And it's where you're doing this thing. Let's say you're in a job and you don't really love it. You don't really love the people you work with. It's not truly motivating, inspiring, but it pays the bills. It's consistent. The people really aren't that bad. And it's consistent. So you just keep on attending the same job time after time, year after year. But you know intrinsically you're meant for more. And so typically, like, it's not until, there's a new boss and they change the hours on you, they change your pay, and now you're like, this is so bad, and I won't stand for some of these values that have been changed. I'm going to quit. I'm going to find a new job. And so many people, I've characterized it previously of like, I think many people are living lives of quiet desperation. But I think so many people are living in this region beta paradox where it's okay. They're cool with the mediocrity. It's really not that bad, but it's also not that good. And to me, that's like getting to a park bench at 75 and telling a youngster that's kind of asking you some questions, and you're telling them all the potential that you had that you chose not to even try to explore, even if it was painful, or even if you failed. I would still love the story of the pursuit of what lights your heart on fire. And so typically, it's not until you have that major disruption that you're like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm going to implement change. What are your thoughts on this region beta paradox?
First of all, I'd never heard of it, and I don't know. Maybe I'm in a time of my life where it's not that I don't care about what other people do, but it's so out of my control that it doesn't concern me or occupy any thought. I'm only concerned or allow myself to lean into working or thinking or dedicating time to those who are willing, are open to change. And sometimes, so I'm imagining sitting at the park bench, sometimes speaking to people who are older than I am, have more experience, and are probably wiser than I am. Engaging with them in a way that may spark a reminder of that which, like you say, lights them up, or that which they wanted to explore but never did. And if out of that conversation, it just happened to be this like perfect timing that it produces some action, wonderful. Other than that, there's so much out of my control that I don't even preoccupy myself in it. And I think it comes from, and now I'm just riffing here, I think it comes from having put so much effort into basically pushing my help onto other people that are not willing to receive it, that I've killed myself, or almost killed myself, in the attempt of trying to inspire, encourage, instill that opportunity for change and help people see. And I realized that's not my job. So I don't know what I think about this. What's it called? The
region beta paradox.
The region beta paradox. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look into it and learn more. I feel pretty naive around the topic.
Just something I was thinking about, but I also want to unpack
cool.
a little bit of what you said, where you have so much give, you have so much care, and in some cases it sounds like you may have pushed that onto people that were not ready to receive that, and so inevitably it deterred you a little bit to be like, you know what, I want to work with people that are open and ready to receive. But also, as somebody that does care and possesses as much knowledge and variance and metaphorical speech and ways to connect and meet people where they're at, sometimes very emotionally painful when you can't penetrate something that you perceive as porous that can be a sponge to things that you can offer to mitigate their pain and help move the needle in the right direction. How have you personally managed some of that? Like, has that led to just a distance, a state of freeze, waiting for people to pursue you? What are your thoughts there?
I think I shared this in the last episode I was on with you. I think it comes down to this idea of creating and attracting. I just need to express myself. And I have chosen to do it in ways publicly, through podcasting, through my book, through any online experience that I've created, any seminar. Where I have simply, or I've found the most amount of success and made the most amount of impact, positive impact, when I've simply expressed what was true for me. The moment I have tried to be deliberate about sharing a message or telling people what I think, that's the moment it's fallen on deaf ears. It's fallen into the abyss. And then that becoming what I believe to be a reflection of my value and being like, see, you suck. Look what you're doing. You can't even get people to do a push-up. You can't even. That can be corrosive. And I think we're in a world where we all now like have this like microphone and we can all jump on social media and say some things. That the moment it turns into a mission of projection, that's the moment we start to fail, like true failure. This is not like failing forward or some positive thinking like that. This is true failure. But the moment we express ourselves because it's alive in us without an agenda, and this is the beauty, without the agenda of making an impact, that's the moment we start to catalyze change in our environment, or we start to make change in people. People are like, wait, this person is saying something right now that's not directly for me, but it feels like I can relate to it. It sounds like it belongs to me. Maybe that which I'm thinking has something too, and that starts to move their thinking, their behavior, their ways, their curiosity in a direction that was needed at that time. That's cool stuff. And I think this happens really well in art. The pure artist simply paints. They simply sculpt. They go and do their thing. And they do it because they want to do it. And it feels good. And then all of a sudden they show somebody, or it's seen, and people are like, whoa, this is incredible. How did you, out of marble, pull out these details? How did you this is amazing. And that evokes this like sense of awe, wonder, curiosity, and I think that's the place that we should be living in a creator's mindset, in an artistic space. And then to realize that all art, all creativity has a mechanical expression that can be seen as a practice. That's cool.
It's really cool. It also just, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is, it's the most root form of play. Expression without an agenda. You're exploring. You have this creator's mindset. You have tinkering in the lab and exploration. And you're striving to share that in a way of like, hey, this is something that's living in between my ears, and I'm trying to figure out step by step how to express a feeling. And I think sometimes so many people are telling people what to do rather than just sharing their experience. And then as a byproduct, it probably shuns the receiving ear. And I really think it's important for people to hear what you said, because in this day and age, everybody's got a voice or a platform or a way of just throwing out their 2 cents. And I think really stepping back and sharing our experience, our personal story, our thoughts, but then also realizing, hey, these thoughts are subject to change. This isn't law. This isn't necessarily fact. It's what I believe to be true up until this moment. And then striving to interact and create, as you said, as opposed to, this is how you should do it. This is how I do it. And I'm the expert on the subject matter. People are like, whoa. And then at the very first onset of you having a slip up or a misspeak or something like that, it's like, see, I knew you were full of it. I really think that the way you describe that is special. And all of us, in my opinion, are artists. I've said it time and time again, but I just think there is this intrinsic drive that all of us have, and you got to be around the right people that can help tease it out. And if I've said it on a few episodes, if you work with your hands, you're a laborer. If you work with your hands and your mind, you're a craftsman. But if you work with your hands, your mind, and your heart, you're an artist. And I think it's the synergy between those three that elicits the magical flow state of play. And even in the humble pursuit of trying to get to play, it almost feels like you have an agenda. If it's just, hey, I'm going to start. Oh, I'm thinking about this thing. Let me play with that. Okay, cool. There's that person. Let me see if I can interact with them through this form of play. All of a sudden, it just adds up into this monumental sculpture, as you described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody who wants to geek out, this is a tough read, but it's called Homo Ludens, which is, the playful being or human.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's an intense read, but it's all about the nature of play. And
it's the highest form of learning, man. And
it's definitely a very high form of learning. There's some very interesting things about about play in that book. One of them talks a little bit about this idea that even when we're suffering the most or we're going through really tough times, so even right now in Gaza, you're going to have kids playing. Bryce, did I lose you?
I got you back now. Yeah, you're all good. The play concept is very unique, but almost everything can be gradually described as play in some ways. And something that I've heard you discuss is this concept of emotional fitness. Mm-hmm. And I'd never heard somebody describe it that way. It created a lot of buy-in for me because I think just as a male, I was taught to, hey, feelings come and go. You can't hold on to them too much. They shouldn't have that much power to dictate your action. And inevitably, honestly, I just didn't pay that close attention to them. And then as I've gotten older, it's like, okay, there's feelings and there's emotions, and trying to figure out how to separate the two, how to figure out which ones to hold on to, which ones to let go of. And you've done such a good job describing it as fitness, describing it as being a spoke in the wheel. And I want to unpack that a little bit. I think there's a lot of people that can get a ton of value as to how you articulate this concept of emotional fitness.
Mm. Yeah, let's do it. Where do you want to start?
How do you define it?
Oh, yeah. The emotional fitness is the way that I define it is as the ability to move into a state of being that translates or applies to a purpose. So if we were to peel back the layers here, according to, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I'll mention it again, and I think she's probably become the most quoted person, at least on my podcast, who is the author of a book called How Emotions Are Made. Her name is Lisa Feldman Barrett. She was just on the Huberman Lab podcast, and anybody who's interested should go listen to her. But basically what she says is that an emotion is a construct made by our brain, and it's there to signal and prepare our body to take the next step or act in a way that is going to meet our needs. And this is coming because the brain is predicting what's about to happen, and thus managing our physiology and priming it for what is to come. And we experience that through an emotion. And this is now a little bit of my language, is that translates into an emotion being the lens through which we see the world, and that the lens through which we see the world is influenced and informed by our state of being. And our state of being is not only what we're thinking, not only what we're feeling or the sensations, but also the state of our physiology.
I want to ask a quick question right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that is, what comes first, right? Like I've heard some people say action is what triggers emotion. But you can potentially say for some people that the emotion is what triggers the action. And, you know, there's so many people like myself that love getting up and getting moving in the morning, getting natural sunlight, getting into a cold plunge, all things that will elicit dopamine or norepinephrine, that then things don't stress me out as much. I'm a little bit more productive. And I know Huberman and Peter Attia love to talk on these concepts as well. But I guess that's the big overarching question is like, what comes first, action or emotion?
I don't think there's one that comes first. I think, and this is just me intuitively, I've done no research, I've read no papers on this, so I'm just a dummy speaking from a place of ignorance. But this is my take on it and what my intuition and just first sense tells me. It's that we are purely mechanical beings when it comes to action and thought. Our emotions are that which allow us to engage with both of those. So our emotions are always there. They're kind of like the backdrop that simply allows us to interface. That's the way that I see it.
It's a really, really interesting way of looking at it for sure. It almost brings to mind that like they're always there, but we find ways to lock them in a box. And then other times it's like you've locked so many of them in a box that they all come out at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's, I've always given this example of, for example, one of the practices that I recommend we all have to some degree is some sort of journaling. And one of the reasons I talk about journaling is because I believe that journaling, especially when it's just kind of letting yourself just express whatever is coming up, it's a way of closing your mental tabs. It's a way of, if you imagine yourself being a computer and you looking at a screen, it's a way of you just closing the tabs. People who don't close the tabs all of a sudden get to a point where their computer crashes and it goes into an automatic restart. That could be sickness for us. That could be a panic attack, some kind of breakdown.
It's a very
dealing
well
with.
said concept. I really do think, I've always said writing fills the gaps within our thinking. But I like that a lot of, hey, this thing is something that's living rent-free between my ears. It's playing ping pong. It's swimming around in my headspace. Why don't I get it down on paper, create some clarity, orient myself, create a relationship with it? And I've also heard somebody say, once you write it down, actually give it a name. Give it a emotional label. And then from there, you can actually put it into a different place, or you can fully let it go if it's no longer serving you. I really like that concept of a way of closing your mental tabs.
Yeah. Yeah, it helps. And I think this is where meditation comes into play. It's kind of cleansing in a way because it allows you to break through the noise and the chaos of your internal world, which can be a scary one for a lot of us. I remember as a kid, I remember going to bed and being scared of going to bed because I knew I was going to transition into the dream world. And because I didn't have as much control in the dream world, I was scared of falling asleep and going through this. People experience this on a daily basis, constantly. They have these moments where they are called to reflect or have some kind of introspection, and they avoid it at all costs. And this is where now substance abuse comes into play, a behavior that may be unhealthy within relationships, ways of communicating. I mean, you name it. We try to avoid the introspection at all costs because it's so damn scary and it feels like it's out of our control. But when we access it, there's something very powerful that happens there, which is, one, there's this cleansing, the closing of the mental tabs, for example. There's this deeper understanding and a different expression of our emotions, or at least our relationship to those emotions. And that's where we find what's behind all of that, which is our awareness, this sense of stillness, this sense of everything is one, totality. People call it the universe. They call it God, whatever you want to call that space. And in that space, nothing can happen to you. And you are the witness of it all. And that's kind of the beauty of this game of emotions and this game of emotional fitness, is that you start to become more comfortable and more aware of the reality of our existence. And when I say reality, I'm kind of I want to be cautious even saying reality, because I don't know if this is even real sometimes. It's that it's that messy and that convoluted. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
I digress. Going back to how I define emotional fitness is moving into a state of being that translates into purposeful action, and we can unpack that however you want.
Yeah, I'm curious if somebody comes to you and they're craving knowledge in the realm of emotional fitness. Sounds like journaling is like a big prompt that you give them. Is that where you start, or where do you start? And then maybe what's your favorite prompt for people to explore in journaling?
Yeah, great question. I don't think anybody has ever come to me saying I feel a certain way unless we have a prior relationship. Most people come to me and they say, I have a problem. I'm not selling enough, or I'm not performing at the level that I want to perform, or I can't get my team to engage, whatever it may be. Everybody has a problem. And then you start talking to them, and you start just peeling back the layers of what their needs are. And then they get to a place where they're like, oh, I just feel really unsatisfied with my work. Oh, okay, cool. Now we can prescribe a practice, and that may be journaling. Let's just write about what it means to feel unfulfilled, what it means to feel fulfilled about your work, and see what comes up. And that's the beauty, is that the work that I do as a coach within the realm of emotional fitness, I become kind of like a therapist. I'm not there to solve your problems. I'm just there to allow you to solve your own. So I just become a mirror, and although it is hard work and it can be really painful, I think it's work that we all have to do in different areas of our lives, whether we're parents or siblings or partners or friends, whatever it is. We need to be able to hold space for each other and then reflect in ways that are not necessarily casting judgment, which is something I can do easily if I care about performance, but rather of discernment, or simply a reflection of what we are currently understanding when it comes to the reality of that which the person you're with is trying to express, and then allowing that person to contrast with that and be like, oh, that's how you hear that? That's crazy. Let me reframe. Let me rephrase. Let me say that again, or I'll come back to you when I have a better idea. That's the work. So when it comes to the prescriptions, I mean, you can do anything. You can even pick your nose and make picking your nose the practice that leads you to enlightenment. That's the funny thing about this, is that the world of emotions has an infinite number of tools to access it, and it's pretty special when you see it that way.
It is special, and I love that. For whatever reason, fitness and movement seems to be part of the vessel that you use to elicit healing. And
for sure.
If I look back at some of your teaching, you always liked to teach certain movements from the top down. And I always thought that was such a great metaphor for people coming to you and they have this problem. They're in this space of just extreme chaos. You kind of, at least from my observation, you have them pause and you think, okay, what do you want? What is the ideal outcome? And then it's almost like you have them write what that is and create a vision for where they're trying to go, and then work backwards from there. And I think that derives a value system for there to be subtle check marks along the way for people to pursue their peak expression. And I think sometimes people are stressing about things that, quite frankly, don't really matter in relation to their specific goal or what they actually want. It's just something that's creating subtle frustration. And you do such a great job of reframing that, perspective shifting, and then the concept that you said, holding space. How are you able to hold space for so many different people? I'm sure that weight gets heavy. Mm-hmm. And did I describe that appropriately with the concept of kind of working backwards?
Yeah, I think what I have always done just intuitively is working with that which matters to people, whether it's in their control or not, and making that a key component of the driver towards the adaptation that they're seeking that's going to produce the best results for them, whatever that may be. So an example is if, let's say I'm working with a client who is elderly and maybe is scared of falling. Okay, this person may not be able to articulate to me that they're scared of falling. They're just saying, I don't have the balance or strength to walk up and down stairs or whatever it may be. And I need to get stronger there. Identifying that problem that they think they have, which is lack of strength, comes from a place where they're scared of something. There's a fear. And it's utilizing that thing that matters to them, which is being strong enough to go up and down stairs, play with their grandkids, whatever it may be, to utilize that coupled with the emotion to do the things that they have to do that's going to lead to their outcomes. So I've always spoken in emotional terms, and I've always placed, and at first I used to do this because I didn't want to take the responsibility, but I've always placed the responsibility on others. I've always said stuff like, I don't care about your problems. I have enough of my own. But I do care about what you're going to do about your problems. That has always been my approach. And when it comes to movement specifically, I mean, our brain is wired for movement. And if our brain is producing a construct that is an emotion, then our movement is directly related to our emotional state. And I mean, there's now an infinite number of work done around movement or physical culture and one's well-being, one's mental acuity, and thus longevity and so on. Yeah, a huge component. And I've always tried to at least encourage movement in people's emotional fitness practices.
It truly is medicine in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. How do you personally hold space for people? What's some of the tools that you use in your pursuit of trying not to just fix everybody's problems, right? That's probably like an intrinsic thing that you like natural knee-jerk to do, and you've probably done it. And then you're like, man, I probably should have just like had presence and held space and tried a perspective shift rather than try to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nowadays I basically say, hey, we're running out of time. I'm just going to tell you what to do, okay? And they'll be like, yeah, thank you. That's what I wanted from the beginning. But yeah, I just try to shut up. Like, just shut up. Be quiet. Don't speak unless you have something to add. And if you do think you have something to add, find the right moment. Let people know, preface that you're about to share something. And that's pretty much it. Holding space is so easy. I have a friend who we hold space for each other when needed. And basically what we do is we call and we say, hey, I just need 5 minutes to say this thing that I don't even know if it's true or not. And then the other person on the other side just shuts up and doesn't even give you any response. And it's kind of like, are you done? Yeah, you done? Yeah, good. Okay. You hang up and then you move on.
That's such a special friend. That's like, you say it's easy, but that's not easy to do. Like, I think I've graduated to that level, but it took me time to get there because you see loved ones or people that you care about and you're like seeing the problem that's happening. You're like, I want to jump in and like do this thing, but inevitably that doesn't necessarily help. Like, it does take a level of maturity and experience to then flex that muscle over time. What advice would you give to people that maybe don't have that naturally or intuitively, that are maybe trying to develop that? And honestly, that leads to a better coach. That leads to a better partner, a better friendship. There's so many different benefits to the concept of holding space.
Okay, this is a hard one because if you're listening to this and you don't intuitively have that in you, then you're probably not going to hear anything that I'm going to say. So this is not for you. This is for those who intuitively know how to hold space for people and know what that looks like, to simply continue to do it. And when the time is right, encourage those people who you're holding space for to do that for somebody else. And at first, you can, position it as something kind of selfish, where holding space for somebody else is actually going to make you feel better. Yeah.
I like that. I also like prefacing with the question sometimes of, hey, I'm seeing something. I might have a suggestion. Are you able to receive that right now? And, sometimes people are so in it, they're like, not today. Let's do it another time. Or they're like, okay, let me hear what you have to say. And, let's ping pong it out a little bit. I think there's a few different ways to explore that concept. The holding of space, though, for the friends that are able to provide that and know how to do it, it's really cool. It's a really cool concept that I've crossed paths with quite a bit in the last year or so. And I'm like, wow, this is something that you feel like you're not doing anything, but just your sheer presence and your willingness to have an open ear, I think, is really helpful. It's verbal journaling in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, speaking out loud what you're experiencing and trying to find words for it is huge. And I think this is something that the moment you become a parent, you learn how to do to some degree, or you realize that it is important. Some people realize it too late, but it's something that I think parents naturally do, especially when you start going through the different stages of child development. I mean, you have all these moments where, as babies, they don't know how to communicate what they need, but they're definitely trying to express something. So you just hold the baby. And then you maybe try to do things that maybe are going to, get them to burp or whatever it may be, so that they can feel a little more comfortable, or soothe them so that they can fall asleep. You're basically helping them regulate. You become a co-regulator. That evolves over time. And I mean, I do this with my mom today. I'm almost 42 years old, and my mom holds space for me all the time, and she's done this my whole life. And sometimes she even has the opportunity to do that with me, and she's like, I'm sorry I'm complaining, but I just need to get it off my chest. I'm like, yeah, go for it. I've been complaining to you for 42 years. This is insane. Of course.
Yeah, but you probably learned some of these skills from her, right? Like
100%.
There is an energy that you possess that it's a safe space that allows people to feel comfortable communicating to you, knowing that you're going to hold space and not judge and not deconstruct, not take what they're saying and minimize it or make them feel bad about saying it. And that, I think, comes from a really healthy childhood and upbringing. What was your relationship like with your mom that allowed you to develop so much emotional intelligence?
Well, before I answer that question, something that was coming up for me is, and this is not to air out my marital problems, but between my wife and I, one of our things is, once in a while, my wife, Tanya, has said to me that she hasn't felt safe around me sharing certain things. And I could totally see where it comes from, because I can be a fixer, a performer, and the closer you get to somebody, you become more of that, which is kind of like, you just want to cut through. Can we just get to the thing? Can we just avoid all this and do the thing that we're here to do? And it can become a little short. But in addition to that, it also comes from the upbringing. My wife's experience in sharing what was alive in her was very different for her as a kid than what I experienced. I experienced being a complete shit show of a kid, and if you were to call it something, I was the trouble child, so to speak. I was the one that had the most amount of complicated behaviors, emotional reactions. Let's just say challenging. I wouldn't follow the rules. Just a complicated kid. And my mom didn't waver once on what we could call unconditional love. There were never conditions that I had to meet, standards that I had to meet for her to be connected and attached to me. So, for example, if I was having, I this one I can't even remember, but she's told me about this one a couple times where I was just going so nuts. She had to lock me in a room, and she sat on the other side of the door until I calmed down, and she made sure to tell me, I am here, you are safe, and allowed me to regulate by myself until I was in a position where I could reconnect and not have this barrier between us, which was the door.
I just want to note something kind of real quickly. Like, in such a elevated height of emotions in a moment like that, that's powerful. For her to reiterate that you are safe, allow herself to just sit with it. And I'm sure she's got a whole range of thoughts, and she's probably thinking of different scenarios. And for her to just say and remind you, I am here and you are safe. That sounds like some of the most powerful words that you can actually say to anybody that can be a metaphor for lots of different scenarios. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Not easy.
It's not easy. And then on top of that, I mean, what was I, probably 6 or 7? I remember she would teach me relaxation techniques and meditation, and she was very connected to that. I mean, my parents moved from Sweden to the Bay Area in the 80s, and that's after, the 60s, the hippie movement in San Francisco, and then in the 70s, there was tons of Eastern philosophies moving in. So she was consuming at that time a lot of this content. Of course, not the way that we do it today, but through books. There were speaking engagements, things like this. Plus, there were practitioners in the schools and in the Bay Area itself. So she picked up a lot of that, and that's when I was born. So I was kind of born into this, the start of what you could call personal development. And then, of course, was instilled a lot of these ways of thinking and principles through my mother, whether it was directly or just through her presence in our relationship.
For sure.
Yeah, but my mom is definitely, she was designed to do this.
Sounds like it, man. She might need her own podcast too.
She's an artist, and she has so many strong opinions. I mean, she's a trained lawyer. My grandfather was, I guess you would call it like a head judge within the country in Sweden, and my mother did go to law school, but then became a mother and retired. And on top of that, has always been an artist, painter, weaving baskets, sculptures, interior design, all these things. And she has a great way of thinking about life, an amazing philosophy, and is extremely informed on so many topics at levels that most people that I know are not. And so she could definitely have a podcast and do a way better job than I do.
Sounds like a jack of all trades. It helps me understand a little bit how you have so much knowledge in varying spaces, but also that concept of whenever you find something isolated, it's typically connected to everything in the universe. You do a good job bridging the gap between things, and I think art does a really good job of that. And it sounds like she gave you a great set of lenses to articulate that and help people connect the dots a little bit more. I guess what I'm curious about is, how do you create buy-in for people? If they're coming to you with that problem and you're not necessarily solving the problem, inevitably most humans are impatient and they want the thing. They want the 3 things, right? I get that as feedback all the time. Bryce, you always talk about how it,
Bryce,
how it depends.
I can tell you already. You know when they buy in? When they actually pay me.
Yeah. Skin in the game.
It's skin in the game. And I kind of joke about that, but the more people pay me, the more they buy in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science. It makes sense, but it also It also is such an interesting component because, like, money talks. And in this particular instance, like, it's cool when people put in something and then they're obviously going to get out what they put in. And I mean, the other concept here is the magic you're looking for is in the work that you are avoiding. And when people pay for something, typically they'll not avoid the magic, or they'll not avoid the work anymore in pursuit of the magic.
Yeah, there's at least a reminder there somewhere in their bank account or somewhere that says, hey, you better pay attention to this. And I mean, that's I'm like half joking, half serious when I say that. But yeah, the buy-in happens when they realize that what they need and what's going to get them to access the feeling that they desire is on the other side of doing the thing, just like you said, and paying attention to the thing that they have to pay attention to, that all of a sudden the thing that's hard becomes rather easy. And this kind of, if we take it back to when we were talking about transitions and it being painful and me kind of joking around a little bit and saying, I wouldn't do it, that was just miserable. The hardest part, this is so cliche, it's painful, but the hardest part is starting. And the reason is because you have to do so much mental gymnastics to get to the place of finding alignment between that what you're feeling, your emotional, your personal state, and then your thinking aligned with that what you want. And it has to be perfect timing so that the context kind of fits you so that you can move through. And it's almost like the way that I think about it is life is this kind of like revolving door. You know, at some airports and some malls, there's like a revolving door that you have to enter at a certain time for it to work perfectly. Life is a little bit like that. Or it's like double dutch, right? You have to wait for the right timing. And I think we are a novice at many things, especially when it comes to our emotional state. So, yeah, we kind of become a little hesitant. You've seen the people, right? When they're doing the double dutch thing, they're kind of like jerking back and forth. They don't know when to go. But those who know how to do it, they start to find the rhythm and then they enter smoothly. What I'm trying to do, and this is now like the impossible task, is I'm trying to help people catch the rhythm of their emotional state, which is naturally varied throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout their lives, so that they can enter these revolving doors of transition opportunities with as much ease as possible. That's it.
Adding tools to the toolbox so that way they understand when to step on the gas, when to be patient, when to pause. I think that's a really cool way of describing it. And also you mentioned the hardest part is to start. But once you start and you get over that first obstacle, now you have proof of concept. And confidence without evidence is a delusion. But when you have proof of concept and you can look back and be like, no, I got through that thing. And that thing was actually really painful. In my opinion, that delivers now momentum. And momentum, going back to the movement that we described, movement is medicine. Movement is where the flow takes place. And when there's momentum, now there's forward progress. But you have to have that undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. And that doesn't come until you overcome that first obstacle, and then potentially that second obstacle, and then the third obstacle. But you have to continue to outwork that self-doubt. And if you don't, then inevitably you're yelling affirmations in the mirror, and that doesn't build the confidence. And so it sounds to me that you're giving people the confidence to start, knowing that, like, hey, every failure is not a negative component to the story or to the journey. It's a data point. You can cross that one off the list. Let's try again in a different way. And I think it's really fun to see how inevitably you're building confidence. And you and I both know, especially in reflection in the fitness space, when that person comes in and loses a lot of weight, what do you see next? The outfit starts to change, right? You see the woman that comes in, she's all covered up in the beginning, and then over time, she's in the sports bra. She's changed the yoga pants. There's things that elicit a lot more confidence. She has a pep in her step. She's having better conversations, better relationships. Now she's helping to support other people. And that same analogy bleeds into business, bleeds into emotional fitness, and bleeds into what I want to dive into next, Carl. And that's this thing that you describe as solopreneurship. So many people are embarking on this journey. Everybody has a brand. How would you define that? And what's that journey been like in solopreneurship?
Yeah, it's the venture of one that has the potential of becoming a venture of many. And it doesn't just have to do with business. Business just happens to be a mechanism that allows you to create a transaction of value, which just big words for saying, let's exchange something, whether it's money, time, resources, that allows us to move the needle on that which we care about. It's that simple. And I believe that we're all a business of one. We're all an organization of one. And the moment we choose to embark on that little individual journey, we start to realize that we can't really do it alone. We need to interact with our environment, and our ability to interact with the environment is that which helps us become better. And becoming better is not necessarily something that is measured in numbers at first. It's something that is felt, and I've said this so many times already. It's probably painful for people who have already heard me say it.
I think it's important to say, though, man, just kind of highlighting that a little bit.
By feel.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a numerical value. Like, I'll just give a personal story that maybe elicits buy-in for our listeners. For a very long time, like, it was about the numbers on the bar for me, and competing in the sport of CrossFit, it was like, how much can I lift? How fast can I do it? What's the score? What is the proof of concept that I'm getting fitter? However, now I've gotten to a place where it's more about, how do I feel? It's intuitive. It's around rate of perceived exertion, as opposed to the load owning me. It's around, can I do all the tasks within my day pain-free, support those around me? And a big indicator for me was when I got on flights to travel, I didn't have excruciating knee pain all the time. And so now it's eliciting buy-in around, wow, maybe there is an altered state of fitness for me now that better serves my journey and my lifestyle, as opposed to it just being numerical. It's a feeling. And I think that's a good metaphor personally that maybe some people can relate to based on what you're describing around progress.
Yeah, that's well said. Where were we?
Just around like progress in relation to solopreneurship is not only around numerical values. And you were talking about business of one and money, time, and resources being different forms of transaction. Yeah.
I think it's an exciting topic, whether you are somebody who works for a firm or an organization, or you're starting a business. You're ultimately the captain of your own ship. So it's good to learn how to navigate it. And whatever it is that you're doing is some kind of venture. You're entrepreneurial in some way. And the encouragement is for people to just dive in and to allow their actions, their thinking, and that which they're creating to give them some feedback and to sit with whatever comes their way to make the next decision, to take the next action. And specifically, the way that I'm doing it these days is I'm working with athletes and creators. And although I'm in the very early stages of developing this, my intention was to develop some sort of agency. So at the moment, I'm acting as a sports manager, agent, and doing some representation for athletes and creatives in a way that allows them to develop a viable business. And this is basically the challenge I'm facing is bringing art to the market. How do you do that? And although this has been done before in many different ways, what I'm finding is that there are these different layers that I'm exploring, where there's personal development, business development, craft development, and depending on how you place it in a hierarchy within one's practice and that which they do. So let's say we have an athlete. who's trying to become a successful athlete, a professional athlete, one that has a career that lasts their whole life beyond playing the game or competing in something. It requires a huge sense of can't find the word right now, but a deep understanding of their craft, not only their sport, but their craft as a human. It's like, what does it mean to be a CrossFit athlete on planet Earth in this world? What does it mean to be a breakdancer, a professional breakdancer within this world? What does it mean to be a painter within this world? And how do you play the game, going back to play now, the game of business, so that you can continue to amplify and do the thing that you love for the rest of your life in different forms? And it seems simple, but it's a hard problem to solve because every single person is different. Every single expression is different. And although there are methods and practices and ways of doing it, because everybody is different, you need to be very meticulous about how you put the pieces together. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm currently doing. That's very exciting. And found some success in it, meaning like I've closed several deals and brought money or helped facilitate bring money to people in a way that is going to allow them to amplify their career. But those resources that they're receiving at a top level, like top line sales are great type thing, mean nothing if the infrastructure of their business and career and craft is not there to support that.
Very well said. It's cool to see how you've pieced it all together, and you're providing like a flex and a freestyle to this business world where right now they play a game in a certain role, whether that's athlete or creator or whatever the highlight is right now. But it almost seems to me that you're using emotional fitness and those characteristics to help tease out the values and missions of each of these individuals to then elicit a why. And it's almost like an equator exercise and trying to figure out the stories and the moments in time that have value to these individuals that then build the brand and their skill set and the things that they can bring to the world, not just in the moment of the highlight of their craft, but how they can impact the world in other ways based on their interests, the things that they're good at, and then the things that they want to learn. And I'm pulling probably from Simon Sinek and a few other people that have had these different concepts. But I love that you're combining it with art, and that there is, everybody's going to have a different flavor as to how they interact with brands and business. And I'm impressed, man. It's cool to see you get to this point, because it's cool to see all the other things that led to this. And it can be a total package where you're combining all the different things that you've done over the years into this agency that maybe I would categorize like a digestible smoothie of so much of Carl. And then you can also have different parts of it that you share with people in the form of progression, which is something you've, in my opinion, been a master at over the years, taking really complex scenarios. And they can be complex, and then you can make the complex thing better. Back when you were coaching Annie Thor's daughter, and you were trying to make the complex thing better in her pursuit of 20 muscle ups at that time. Or you could then create the progression over time of each one of these individual entities where other people can meet you there. And then you talk about how those concepts enhance them to what you've always talked about, which is the 60%. Once you get to 60%, move on. And then go back to the very beginning, and then you really become a master of the mundane. You understand all the fundamental principles that lead to the complexity. And I mean, Carl, we've talked 3, 4, 5 times, and now I'm able to receive and understand, oh, wow, like you've truly been a visionary. I mean, I don't know if you knew about this agency back when we first crossed paths in like 2013, 2014. But it really makes sense now to see all these things.
Well, I was going to tell you a story
together
that you reminded me of, actually. It was at the OC Throwdown. I think it was 2013, actually. And that was, I think, also the year where Kevin Ogar had his accident.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There was like an athlete tent. I was there. I think I was there with NFS Sport and then doing something with Caveman Coffee. And there was like a lot going on at the time. But I remember going in there and I had like 20 badges and I was like definitely not dressed in workout clothes. And I just remember going into the athlete's tent and I went to Team Invictus. And I think Camille was there at the time, and Lauren was there. Anyways, I just remember going up there, and Camille said something to me. She's like, I just don't get you. She said, she's like, I just don't get you. And I just kind of chuckled, and I kind of walked away, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense because I don't necessarily fit the mold of any of what's happening here. But I see the potential of what's happening here, and I love being in the mix of helping move the needle or create culture or help people see the thing that they have to see for the totality of it to grow while the individual gets to express themselves also at their highest level. And that's always been the theme. And funny enough, you mentioned Annie Thorisdottir. The first time I coached Annie Thorisdottir was at CrossFit Invictus. CJ Martin let me use the space for us to train. So yeah, it's all kind of like circling back 10 years later.
Yeah, it's so cool. The other concept that's rad here, man, is art. You were describing like you don't really fit the mold, but there's something to be seen here. You can feel something. There's a presence about you. You elicit metaphorical jargon that maybe relates to people, or there's a story, or even maybe just something that's relatable along the way. And the way you teach, the way you speak. I mean, when I see your stuff on TikTok, like I'm just like captivated by it. And I'm not even a big TikTok user. Like I don't even go on that much, but when I see how you communicate, man, it's different. It's unique and it's very special. And I'm just thankful to cross paths with you today and pull out some of these stories and share with our amazing audience as I go on this new rebranding journey with the ALLSMITH project. Like you've been on my list always. Amazing. And being able to kind of categorize you as a mentor of mine and somebody that I look up to, it's just really cool to have you as a part of this new chapter for me.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Bryce, and it's cool to hear my confidence, although momentarily, because later on I'll forget. It feels good, and I'm excited to continue doing this thing. And I feel strongly that which I have and everybody has inside that they think of they return to, and they feel they want to express that is your calling, and that in one way or another you're going to have to lean into it if you want to feel what is actually possible in this life and in this form. So yeah, if there's one thing I could encourage people to do is, if you have that little voice, that little thing that's inside of you that feels like, oh yeah, you should try this, just give it a shot. Even if you don't tell anybody, just do the thing, see what happens, and yeah, tell us how it goes later.
Totally. To echo that, talking about the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading about the thing isn't doing the thing. Just journaling about the thing or writing about it isn't doing the thing. Take the leap and do the thing. Where can people find you, Carl?
Where can they find me? Yeah, just social media, Carl Paoli, freestyleconnection.com. Where else can we? My podcast, The Freestyle Way. Come listen. Come over there. Check it out. Yeah, the podcast has actually been really fun. So anybody who wants to listen to that, I would love to hear how you feel about it and what's coming up for you. But yeah, those are the places. Freestyle Connection, social media, podcast.
I love it, man.
Here.
I also, yeah, absolutely. I also heard it yesterday. Previously, everybody was saying, "Oh, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." I'm starting now to evolve towards you're the average of the 5 podcasts you listen the most to.
Yeah, that's a good one. I should be careful too what I listen to then.
I mean, it's a part of our nutrition, right? Like, it's not just
sure.
what you eat, but it's what you consume. It's what you watch. It's what you read. It's what you choose to have in your algorithm. And so inevitably it's gonna be part of the digestive process and how we think and how we feel. And so you're definitely on my list as somebody that I love to speak with often. And I look forward to crossing paths with you soon, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
For those of you listening to the ALLSMITH Project, please hit that rate, review, subscribe sign. Give us a cool little rating around these amazing conversations with special humans like Carl Paoli. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time, guys.